Hello and welcome back to Fertility Talks, the Therapie Fertility podcast. I'm your host Renee Von Netting, and this season I had the pleasure of sitting down with Medical Director of Thérapie Fertility, Dr. John Kennedy. Our hope was that through this series, through honest conversation and information, we would strip away some of the stigma that sometimes comes hand in hand with infertility and fertility treatment in Ireland. We have covered so many topics this season, from trying to conceive to infertility to a deep dive into IVF and ICSI. We covered testing and treatment options available at Thérapie Fertility, as well as options for single people or LGBTQ+ couples. We are really proud of our first series and are already planning season 2. But before we finish our first season, we wanted to take a look back on some of the best moments we've shared over the last couple of months. So please enjoy the best of Fertility Talks.
The second time, so we had like an early loss with our first transfer, and then we had a second frozen transfer, and I actually didn't tell my wife that I was testing because I was just so afraid that it was not going to be successful. And I got one of the digital ones, and I did it like really early in the morning. It was a Saturday morning, never forget it. And I snuck off, didn't tell her, and I did it, and it came up as, it just said pregnant, and I just ran in, and she knew, she saw my face, and she knew, she's like, did you test?
There we are.
And I was like, yes.
And the most unusual part of that story is that you said you only bought one.
I know, but they're expensive.
Oh, I know. They're putting you're putting some companies' kids through college. I mean, like nobody ever buys one pregnancy test. That's the most
we
unusual
bought
part.
Loads of the cheap ones, but the digital ones are like pricey, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I bought 10 Duff ones and I don't trust them, so now I'm back out to the pharmacy.
Actually, for the second child, I think I bought some in deals. That's just standard second child.
And you're saying the difference between fresh and frozen embryos? Sure, yeah. I think we're the writing on the wall. So the idea of egg freezing is that you won't need them, you won't use them. I was thinking about this on the way in today. And I know I've said this before and I've acknowledged this before. I'm monstrously, massively biased. I live and work in a field where all I see is couples and people struggling to conceive. So the notion that people can get pregnant without IVF or my assistance seems crazy to me, but apparently it does happen. The vast majority of people do not need this treatment at all. They don't need to use frozen eggs. They don't need to worry about fertility. They do need to. So most people won't need to use frozen eggs. So why should you bother freezing your eggs? Well, I think to answer that question, you have to take a step back and ask yourself, how difficult or easy is it to do this? And if it's very time consuming and it's very expensive and there's a lot of hoops to jump through, then it makes it a much more difficult sell. If it's easy, it's straightforward, it's a bit more fire and forget, well, that's a different story entirely, isn't it? You know, modern medicine is struggling with evidence-based medicine at the moment. And I think what we've seen in the last few years is a rise in counter-science culture almost, where you use science to battle science. And the scientific process is just about getting data, reviewing the data, reviewing it again and again and again. And the more data you get, the more correct the conclusions you will draw from this data is. So we've got pretty strong data on a lot of things we do in fertility, in relation to IVF, to ICSI, to egg collections, to embryo transfers, to progesterone, timings and things like that. There's a lot of solid stuff there. Where we don't have a lot of good science is around the woolly areas like PRP, like infusions, like egg quality improvements and things like that. And what tends to happen, because people don't have time to wait the 20 years or the 10 years or the 7 years for better data to emerge, is things come on in a great big rush. They fire up, they become the new big thing, and then literally overnight they drop off. I think in fertility, one of the finest examples we have of this is a thing called endometriosis scratch. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys even went through it or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised. It became for a few years.
Can I just say, it sounds awful.
Yes.
Like just even the phrase scratching.
Yes.
Like the inside.
It's a crappy name. And the fact that it was popular despite being a crappy name is very telling. There was another product, which also I don't have a huge amount of faith in, called embryo glue. That's a deadly name, isn't it?
It's just so
Who doesn't want embryo? Who doesn't want embryo glue? My God, what's wrong?
Stick a bit of Pritt stick in there,
What's
and
wrong
the
with you?
embryo will just
Do you want it to not be glued in? So these, and that shouldn't guide our practice. How sexy a name is shouldn't guide our practice at all. But what was really interesting about endometrial scratch is it came out, and about a year after it came out, this was maybe 2008, 2009, could be completely wrong on those dates, there was an article in, I think, one of the British papers, one of the British Sunday papers, saying revolutionary new process in fertility treatment increases success rates by 200%. 5 years later, there was another article, same paper, exactly the same paper, saying clinics charging for add-ons which have no proven benefit in increasing success rates. Both articles were about endometrial scratch. So that tells you everything. And if you look at the early crappy retrospective data on endometrial scratch, it looked promising. When you looked at the big meta-analysis and the bigger trials, no value at all. But all the clinics, even the ones I was working in, we all adopted it. And it really should make you very, very nervous about knee-jerking into new things. Which brings us to DHEA, which brings us to PRP, which brings us to IVIG infusions or intralipids or all this. There is no good evidence around these. So what you have to do is you have to balance out how much is this costing? How much is this costing financially? Is there any risk with it? So giving an infusion of immunoglobulin, what's the risk of that? Well, it's a blood product. And you don't have to go that far back in Ireland's history to find a history of people who got blood products who ran into problems because of it. I'm speaking, of course, of hepatitis. So you have to be very, very cautious about these things. You can get reactions to them. To say nothing of it, you're just adding cost and time and worry and hassle. And it very much falls into the won't do any harm, might do some good category, and we'll be safe with it, and the risks are low. And also, tragically, the higher the cost, the more likely the person is to believe that it's effective.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to be very metric. The problem is, if you offer these things, if you offer these services, all you can be certain of is they will be overused.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm not saying these things are of no benefit. What I am saying is our ability to correctly define and diagnose who they are of benefit to is incredibly limited. We aren't good at that. So what we tend to do is we overtreat. So you're putting a whole lot of people through a whole lot of unnecessary stuff for potentially, maybe, caveated, asterisk, tiny improvement. If you have endometriosis, that very specific type of tissue, which should only ever occur in the uterus, occurs outside the uterus, in the ovaries, on the fallopian tubes, on the ligaments, on the bowel. You can even get it in scar tissue. Wow. You can get it in gums. It's rarer, obviously, in belly buttons. And every month, that tissue responds to the same hormonally mediated cycle. So it grows and it sheds. But of course, it doesn't shed because there's nowhere for it to shed. So if it's in like a fallopian tube, where is it going? It just causes irritation. You can get some bleeding and it'll be absorbed in the peritoneum. In the ovary, you get cysts forming in the ovary, and they're called chocolate cysts, which is a terrible misnomer. Well, that's terrible because that sounds lovely. Yeah, it ain't. They're filled with this horrible brown sticky fluid, and what that is, that's altered blood, because every month that little bit of endometrial tissue grows, bleeds, sheds, and it just stays there. And so it gets encapsulated and walled off by the ovary, and then that cyst gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, this is all filled with these inflammatory markers and these high cytokines and things of that ilk. So it can cause scarring. It can cause even with mild endometriosis, you can get severe fertility changes. But at its most severe, at stage 4 endometriosis, the pelvis can be what's called frozen and filled with this horrible rigid scar tissue which prevents anything from working well. The way we grade endometriosis is on a 1 to 4 scale, which is based on surgical observation of what we can see. The problem is that the degree of subfertility that's caused by endometriosis correlates very poorly with the grading. So on one end of the spectrum, you can have people with very severe endometriosis who are getting pregnant, and on the other end of the spectrum, you have people with what's called mild endometriosis who can have very severe symptoms or real fertility issues, And yet they get told when they have their surgery or a laparoscopy or what have you, oh no, your endometriosis is very mild. And they're like, well, it doesn't feel very mild. I don't know if you ever heard of The Onion. It's a parody newspaper that's been produced in the States for years. They had a headline there last week which really did resonate, and I think it's a take-home message. So, woman puts off going to doctor until symptoms severe enough for him to believe her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty accurate.
Achingly, depressingly, awfully familiar. And I think endometriosis very much lives in that space where people are told they have mild endometriosis, but they're crippled with pain. They are crippled with pain.
I have quite a few close friends who suffer very badly.
You know, and again, old white dude saying, oh, your endometriosis is mild. That's singularly unhelpful. So how we grade it and how we manage it, again, no more than with the PCOS, we should be looking at the symptoms. What does endometriosis cause? It causes pain. Pain with periods, pain with intercourse, pain with bowel motions. It's pain related. It doesn't necessarily cause heavier periods, although you can get a kind of endometriosis like syndrome called adenomyosis, which is where you get endometrium tissue in the muscle of the wall of the womb, which can cause, again, this big inflammatory change. Again, you'll see a bit of a swelling in the uterus there. And that can cause heavier periods too.
So how does it prevent a pregnancy occurring naturally?
So what's interesting is endometriosis has an impact on every single aspect of female's fertility. So it'll have an impact on egg numbers, egg transport, sperm transport, embryo transport, and implantation. So egg numbers, egg quality, everything. So
everything is harder.
Everything's harder. The one it probably has the least impact on is implantation, but depending on how severe it is, with the caveat that we're limited in our understanding of this. So we know, even if you have very mild endometriosis, like a couple of spots dotted around the pelvis, if you analyse the follicular fluid, the fluid that the developing egg matures in somebody with mild endometriosis versus somebody who has no endometriosis at all, even if that endometriosis is not in the ovaries, you're still going to see differences in the immunological markers within that follicular fluid. And there'll be more pro-inflammatory cytokines and whatnot in the endometriosis. So sufferers, follicles. So we know it's having an impact on eggs right out of the gate. You know, we don't quite know what causes it. There was a lovely theory of retrograde menstruation. So the lining of the womb goes up through the tubes and falls into the pelvis and sticks there and lodges there. You can see evidence of endometriosis at fetal stage. So it's not that. You know, there's other factors involved as well.
It is reciprocal IVF.
Absolutely. And I think everything we've done so far has just been a soft excuse for you to talk about this.
It's all been
leading up to this, and then we can cut it here.
I'm going to be like, I'm done.
Yeah, once we have this in the bag, it's fine.
So I suppose from a medical and fertility point of view, what is reciprocal IVF?
So the idea of reciprocal IVF, it's a variant of IVF that's going to be performed with a couple where you have two females. What's going to happen is you're going to stimulate and do standard IVF on one party. You're going to collect eggs. You're going to fertilize those eggs, usually with the addition of donor sperm, although that's something to be looked at. And then generating embryos and then transferring those embryos in a timely and safe fashion into the other member of the couple. So they carry their partner's genetic child. So
one person becomes the genetic parent and the other the gestational parent.
Exactly. And now Ireland's funny, you know this. It defines motherhood or being a mother as having a baby come out of you, exit you.
Physically.
Yes. Which is obviously somewhat antiquated as a notion. Very and much. doesn't take into account surrogacy and things and things like this. So one of the things we'll need to talk about is how parents are recognised, and certainly in Ireland, one party can be recognised as the mother and the other can be recognised as a parent. Yeah.
So why were you so excited to start offering this service?
Well, it's just elegant, I think. It's sort of clever, and I mean, so everything I say here today has to be put through the lens of the cis hetero white male, you know, but whenever you have a, female couple in front of you. generally, a lot of the time, they'll have an idea that I want to get pregnant and my partner doesn't want to get pregnant, or something like that. But always at the back of your mind, you're thinking, I've got potentially 2 bites of the cherry here.
Yeah.
You know, if I can get this unit a child or children, then that's success. And if it's not working out over here, then I've got a plan B. And you have 2 sets of ovaries and you have 2 uteruses, and the couple are sharing the journey. And I've always felt that donor sperm for a heterosexual couple, I think they do very well with it. I think guys do really, really well when they have to use donor sperm. Mm-hmm. That would certainly be my experience. But it always feels like a bit of a mean trick. Mm-hmm. Like they're very divorced from the proceedings. They're divorced from the proceedings genetically, and there is support and all the rest.
But they don't physically have to do anything.
Exactly. And I imagine it must be somewhat similar for same-sex female couples who are using donor sperm, that the person who gets pregnant and the person who carries the child and the person who gives birth is mum, and the other one is mum's partner. You know? It
can feel like that, absolutely, yeah.
And this is a really elegant way of completely sharing the journey and mixing all of that in, and the nature and the nurture, and it's just, when it works, it's really, really elegant.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very pretty.
Yeah. So I'll tell you about when I first heard about reciprocal IVF. It was when my wife and I had started talking about wanting to do some form of fertility treatment, and we knew we would have to use donor sperm, and it would be like IVF or IUI. We didn't really know what that actually meant at the time. These were just phrases that were thrown around. And we were actually having a glass of wine or something one night, and we said, wouldn't it be so cool if, you know, because I knew I wanted to be physically pregnant, but we said, wouldn't it be great if we could use your eggs, Audrey, and have embryos, and then I could carry them, because that way we'd both really physically be involved in this process. And we were like, that sounds like really bizarre. Like, and then we Googled it, and sure enough, it you know, it was a thing called reciprocal IVF, but it was relatively new. So 2009 in Spain, I believe, was when they first started offering it. So in the scheme of things, it's not too long that it's been offered.
No, not at all. And I mean, there's nothing challenging about it medically versus conventional IVF. It's just the same. I mean, the process is identical. It's just decoupled a little bit. Yeah. And you take eggs, you take sperm, you make embryos, you do embryo transfers.
Yeah.
It's, you know, so...
I'm pretty sure none of them are going to be fact-based.
Okay, super.
And have you heard of this? That wearing like warm socks throughout the 2-week wait can increase your chance.
I'm biting my tongue, because my immediate response, my every fibre will go, oh yeah, no, that's absolute. That's all I want to say. And what? What? I mean, wrap up warm? That's a good idea. That's good advice. Why am I telling people go around with cold feet? I hate having cold feet. That sucks. So...
is it something to do with like the feet being linked to the uterus? Like in Chinese medicine?
I am not pretending to know everything.
Yeah.
I know of no evidence that links warm and or cold feet with increased... Well, I mean, wear socks. Don't go around barefoot. I'm constantly shouting at my children, put some socks on, and then they put socks on.
Dr. Kennedy advises patients to go barefoot.
Also, don't, I mean, put some socks. And if you're going to wear socks, wear some shoes. Otherwise, you're just going to fall when you're going down the stairs, and I'll have to pick you up and deal with it. So that's an interesting
one, isn't it?
I mean, I haven't immediately said that sounds bananas, and it does sound a bit bananas to me. And that will be taken as, well, that seems like a good idea then. I mean, don't have cold feet, but I don't think it's relevant.
There's no scientific
No, not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of.
I do think it is a good idea to stay comfortable through your 2-week wait, but
yeah,
okay. Have you heard about pineapple?
No.
Okay, and I'm interested that you haven't heard about this.
No, I've heard about turmeric. I've heard about omega-3. I've heard about a lot of things, but pineapple, no. What is it? Okay,
so apparently pineapple like has something in the core that can I don't know, it does something, and it just increases your chance of an embryo implanting.
Seriously.
So within the IVF community, a lot of times people will like get T-shirts printed of like pineapple for their transfer, or if they're a pregnancy announcement, it will be like the pineapple is like the symbol. I can't believe you haven't heard this.
I did not know this at all.
That's definitely one that we both ate pineapple throughout our treatment, but also we like pineapple.
Well, pineapple's tasty.
Yeah, so why wouldn't you? Can't believe you hadn't heard that one.
I mean, obviously, what?
Yeah, so apparently it has bromelain that has anti-inflammatory properties.
There you are. Great word.
And yeah, so if you heard that, you'd be like, well, it's anti-inflammatory, so of course.
Inflammation sounds bad.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't want that.
Yeah. I want anti that.
I want anti that.
Yeah.
Okay. Not all the takers on the pro-inflammatory.
Okay, have you heard of drinking pomegranate juice?
Yes.
Okay, so apparently that's to do with increasing the uterine lining.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was doing obstetrics, the number of things, was it raspberry leaf tea and things?
Well, definitely raspberry leaf tea. Yeah. Oh, I did all the things.
Hang on. When you said definitely raspberry, does that mean you think raspberry leaf tea puts you into labour? Because it doesn't. I mean, you might go into labour, but you probably have a term pregnancy on board, so there's a decent chance it's going to happen at some point.
Well, on both of my pregnancies, I was induced, so I'd say the raspberry leaf tea and the curries and the, what was it? Is it dates? Is it dates or is it, what is it? Well, is it a date smoothie?
For heterosexual couple, it's a different kind of date, but it's supposed to increase the chances. There might be something in that, actually, but prostaglandins and whatnot.
So funny. Yeah, do I believe? No, I don't know. I don't, like, if you ask.
Hang on. Let's carve into this a little bit, just for a moment, because we've been talking a lot about superstition and about belief system and all the rest. And you're a rational person.
I am.
What's your basis for thinking that raspberry leaf tea? Because enough people have said it, so there's probably something there, right? I
suppose for me now, I will say I don't believe that it works, but I believe enough that it's cheap and I like drinking tea, and it's something that people do. So is raspberry leaf tea something you have been drinking since? Absolutely not, because I don't need to go into labour.
There we are. Isn't that really, and I'd be as guilty as everybody else about this, but isn't that really interesting? Now, that's a situation where you're going to get induced and it's all going to work out and you're just feeling very pregnant and you just want it to be over and all the rest of the stuff. Now, imagine the ball of anxiety that is fertility treatment and the hope that can come with something there. It doesn't take much to become very, very wedded to something without any actual evidence behind it.
Absolutely.
And all of that said, maybe raspberry leaf tea does help.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't. Yeah. I'm saying the evidence says that it doesn't.
Or there is no evidence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I suppose when something is so cheap and everyone seems to be doing it.
You know what? Won't do any harm. Might do some good.
Yeah.
See? This is where it keeps coming back to. So,
Yeah. So I guess the tricky thing is when you're starting to do interventions that do cost money and do...
Everything has a cost.
Yeah.
Be it raspberry leaf tea is cheap. So it's at the lower end of the involved spectrum, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's still a cost there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's enough that you'd bother having a conversation or a row about it. Go for it, you know? Yeah. But where does that line stop? And it's different for everybody. Yeah.
Interesting.
So what was the? Hang on,
I'm a hypocrite. What was it? Is what we've learned.
So pineapple. Well, aren't we all? I mean, pineapple. Yeah. Again.
Yeah, pomegranate is what we were saying. I hadn't heard of that.
No, I've heard pomegranate. Yeah, I've heard that.
What other ones have you heard of?
Turmeric, omega-3.
And what is turmeric supposed to do?
It's a spice, I think. I don't.
No, but like turmeric is great. Like, and I like using it in cooking.
So, improve egg quality. That was what it was.
Why? Why is it said to do that?
I mean...
Oh, is it probably because the anti-inflammatory
why not?
thing being tried in again? Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. And to be fair, I didn't do a whole lot of digging into it except to go, okay, look, I'll spend a little while finding any papers on it. Of course, there isn't anything out there. I think it's pretty fair, and this is something I've said to an awful lot of patients over the years. You can Google a noun and type egg quality in beside it, and you're probably going to get some manner of a hit. What do we do for a female who comes in? Well, the first blood test, I'm not going to harp on about it because I've harped on about it at length, I think every other time we've spoken about, is AMH. It's a blood test that measures the ovarian reserve. How many apples are left in the barrel? What pool of eggs are you working with? It's about quality. It's not about quality, it's about quantity. Okay? So it just tells you how proactive you should be about your fertility options and how you might respond to treatments. That's it. That's a blood test.
And I actually had it done last week.
Have you got the result back yet?
I haven't even checked. Like, you know, in my case, I'm not too concerned about it, because it was purely, you know, as a way to show people how easy it is to get done.
Yep.
You know, we already have 2 kids. We're not thinking of using my eggs, so it's not necessarily something I need to know. But I wanted to do it to actually just go through the experience of it.
So you've had your AMH done before?
I've never had my AMH done before. That's the thing. So when we went through treatment before, we were very set on, and we talked about this in the Reciprocal IVF episode, that when someone comes to you for Reciprocal IVF, you're going to very much encourage both parties to be tested. When it was, you know, when we were going through our cycles, we knew we were using Audrey's eggs, so I just simply didn't have it done. So I have no idea.
So here's a fun question. Do you think you'll care about the result?
I actually think I will. You know, I wasn't anticipating that, but then I was getting the blood drawn, I was kind of thinking to myself, am I going to care?
You have bitten off more than you can chew here.
We'll see, won't we? Renee's not coming to work.
Yeah, but you're going to feel a certain kind of way.
But it's interesting, of course you do, because it's information you're getting about your body.
Yeah.
But it is important to remember that, you know, even if I did come back with a really low AMH, that doesn't mean I have bad eggs. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't be able to use my own eggs to become pregnant. It is just information.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, guys especially are disproportionately happy or unhappy with the results of a semen analysis.
As though it kind of somehow translates to
virility and who you are as a man.
One is good and one is bad.
And, you know, this makes me less of a man or more of a man. And it can be an awful blow getting a bad semen analysis result.
Yeah, and I think the same for the AMH.
Getting
a low
Absolutely
result.
Agree.
People feel guilty somehow.
Yeah. Shamed and guilt. It's crazy. The best couples, because you do see male factor, you see female factor, the best couples come in as a team. Now, I mean, that's a bit of a woke term, but they are supportive. They're understanding that at any point, either member of the couple may be at a different point on the optimism-pessimism curve. They understand that it's not about blame at all. And people say, oh, it's not about blame, but secretly it is. No, it really isn't. It's guys who get low sperm, find out they have low sperm count, they tend to drop pretty quickly into solution mode and go, right, how do we fix this? You know, if you find a woman with a very low ovarian reserve, that can be very upsetting. And in truth, the treatment options are worse. It's easier to treat male fertility. Just scientifically, we're better at doing it. It's not fair, it's not right, but it's the way it is. So there's generally much more problem solving that happens on that side, and there's much more counselling and education that happens on this side, and that should tell you a lot as well. But it's very, very, the best couples are the couples who very much not all support her in whatever she wants to do, although that is a useful approach. It's people who are just, look, this is our goal together, and how do we achieve that goal? Yeah. You know, that they're coming in as a unit. Yeah. That's what I like to see. You've done great work.
I'll get a tattoo.
And look, just for everybody out there, if you're listening, if there's one person who has championed this space more than any other in the country, it's Renee. For years I've been talking to you about this, and I hope that the community recognises what you've done, and how instrumental you were in getting that across the line and getting enacted and just making things better. So well done, you.
Thanks, John. You've listened back.
A little bit.
You said you weren't going to do that.
I shouldn't have. Nah, Jill, nobody likes the sound of their own voice. But
some people do.
Jesus, I ramble occasionally.
Well, I think...
I blame you.
No. Just blame Renee for everything. I mean, I think the series has been great, and hopefully it's been helpful to people who are either considering treatment, who are going through treatment, who are reflecting on treatment that they've had.
Yeah.
And it's just been, honest and open and
I think we've done that much. I don't think I've been political about it. I think it's been great from that perspective.
Yeah.
Been great to have the platform. It's been great to get it out there. So it's a resource people can draw on and listen as they need to.
And speaking of resources, just to remind people that we have weekly Instagram lives now, which is
right. Yes,
very exciting.
Yes.
And a monthly webinar.
Yes,
and those are always happening on a Tuesday.
Absolutely. So I mean, dial in on them. I think, and going forward, what I want to do is bring. I know you feel the same way. Loads more voices to the table here. I want
experts on different topics.
Exactly. Because I'm fully aware of what I know about and what I don't know, and I'm always going to try slightly cautious of that. So I'd love to get those people involved.
Yeah. So keep your ears peeled for
Thank
season 2.
Thank you very much, Renee. It's been a pleasure.
Same here. Thanks again to each and every one of you who joined us for season 1 of Fertility Talks. An extra big thank you to Dr. Kennedy and to all of those who helped behind the scenes. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you again on next season of Fertility Talks.